I remember the day like it was yesterday, sitting in my flat in Canterbury, scrolling through some old history articles that didn't quite add up. You know how we're all taught that the Nazis just sprang up out of nowhere? Evil fanatics who built a war machine from scratch, all on their own, fueled by hate and madness. That Germany was some isolated dark hole, kicking off World War II without any outside help? Yeah? Well, turns out the story is way messier, and it didn't start in Berlin. It started in the heart of London's financial district, or rather, New York's Wall Street, with a dozen big-name British and American banks and corporations that didn't just do business with Hitler. They built him up, bankrolled him, armed him, and kept the cash flowing even after British and American soldiers were dying on European battlefields. And here's the kicker. Some of these companies actually got richer during the war than before it. So picture this. 1933. Hitler's just taken power. Germany's economy is in ruins, crushed under the weight of reparation payments from the Treaty of Versailles. People are starving. Unemployment is through the roof. The Reichsmark is basically toilet paper. And Hitler promises to make Germany great again. Long before it was a meme. But here's what no one tells you. Speeches don't build tanks. You need steel, oil, and boatloads of cash. Germany had none of those things, so where did it come from? Back in the roaring 20s, London and New York banks were flush with cash, lending to countries all over Europe, including Germany. Even though Germany had lost the Great War and owed billions, banks like Barclays, Lloyds, Rothschild, and J.P. Morgan saw a golden opportunity to get in on the action. There was this deal called the Dawes Plan in 1924, a fancy financial reset button. British and American banks restructured German debt, floated bonds, and made Germany dependent on their money. Between 1924 and 1931, over $350 million, that's about $5.5 billion today, flowed from London and New York to Germany. Not charity, mind you, loans with interest, with strings attached. Basically, these bankers were running the German economy from their leather chairs thousands of miles away. When Hitler took over, he inherited this entire web of debt and dependency. And did these banks pull out? Nope. They doubled down. Here's where it gets really wild. Standard Oil, the American giant owned by the Rockefellers, struck a secret deal with IG Farben, the German chemical titan that later made Zyklon B gas. They formed joint ventures, shared technology, and most importantly, helped Germany produce synthetic fuel. Because Germany had no oil, zero. No colonies, no Middle Eastern fields. Yet somehow, the Luftwaffe kept flying and panzer tanks kept rolling. That synthetic fuel technology came straight from Standard Oil. And guess what? Standard Oil kept this partnership going even after war broke out in 1939. Imagine that. The company that evolved into ExxonMobil giving Hitler the recipe to keep his war machine fueled. You can almost hear the oil executives saying, well, at least it's good for business. Then there's IBM. Yes, the tech giant you probably associate with computers and punch cards. But back then, IBM's German subsidiary customized punch card machines to track prisoners in concentration camps. Every number, every transport, every death count was processed on IBM machines. IBM technicians maintained those machines throughout the war, and IBM headquarters in New York collected royalties. They didn't pull the triggers, but they made mass murder efficient, industrial, and trackable. And after the war, no trials, no consequences, just a pat on the back and a continued rise to tech dominance. Henry Ford was an outspoken anti-Semite who published conspiracy theories blaming Jews for everything from communism to war. Hitler idolized him. Ford's German factories didn't stop making trucks and engines for the Wehrmacht when war broke out. They ramped up production using slave labor from concentration camps. After the war, Ford even demanded compensation from the U.S. government for damage to those factories caused by Allied bombings. Yep, he wanted British and American taxpayers to foot the bill for his Nazi war machine. General Motors' German branch, Opel, was just as complicit. By 1939, they made half of all German trucks and a third of the armored vehicles that powered the Blitzkrieg. Even after Pearl Harbor, when America and Germany were at war, Opel kept producing. When questioned, GM executives claimed they couldn't control their foreign subsidiaries. Translation? We're making too much money to care. After the war, they sued the U.S. government for damages to their German plants, and won. Banks like Barclays and Lloyds operated in Nazi-occupied territories, freezing Jewish accounts and helping Nazis steal assets from families being sent to death camps. And companies like DuPont and ITT sold chemicals and communications equipment to the German military. Even the Union Banking Corporation, run by Prescott Bush, yes, the grandfather of a future U.S. president, held Nazi assets and financed German steel production. The scale of this is staggering. IG Farben used over 80,000 slave laborers at one plant alone, and IBM's machines tracked every one of them. Ford produced 78,000 trucks for the Wehrmacht. Opel made 29,000. Without these contributions, Germany couldn't have conquered France or reached Moscow, and the Holocaust wouldn't have been industrialized. And after the war, the industrialists got off scot-free. The U.S. government needed these companies for post-war reconstruction and the looming Cold War, so they got contracts, funding, and their dirty secrets were buried. Fast forward to today, and the pattern's eerily familiar. Big corporations still do business with regimes committing atrocities because the profits are just too good. Apple, Nike, Tesla, all manufacturing in places like Xinjiang, where Uyghurs are imprisoned in camps. Google tried to create a censored search engine for China. Facebook's algorithms helped organize genocide in Myanmar. Oil companies sell to Saudi Arabia despite war crimes and assassinations. Tech companies build surveillance tools for authoritarian regimes. Corporations don't have morals, only shareholders who want profits. If genocide pays, they'll sign the check. They'll donate to charity, build hospitals, and polish their image, just like Ford and GM did. One hand building hospitals, the other building gas chambers. As long as the hospitals are visible, the world calls them heroes. So, what do you do with this? Understand World War II wasn't just about soldiers and bombs, but also about bankers and businessmen. Without Wall Street, no Hitler. Without Ford and GM, no Wehrmacht. Without IBM, no industrialized Holocaust. They didn't wear swastikas, but they enabled everything for profit. And the worst part, this story didn't end in 1945. It's still happening. Different countries, different products, same greed, same excuses. One last thing. You might think this is ancient history, but the same families who profited from Hitler, they're still running the world. Different names, same playbook, and we've just stopped paying attention. That's when my phone buzzed with a message. You need to see this. It's about a shipment bound for Dover. Something big is coming, and it's connected to all this. My heart skipped a beat. What had I stumbled into? I couldn't shake the message from my mind as I stepped out onto the chilly streets of Whitstable that evening. Dover wasn't exactly around the corner, but I'd grown up near enough to know it was the UK's frontline port, the gateway between Britain and continental Europe. If someone was moving something big through there, it wasn't going to be subtle. Funny thing was, I wasn't exactly a spy or a journalist, just a history buff who'd stumbled down a rabbit hole deeper than I ever imagined. But curiosity gnawed at me like a persistent seagull stealing chips off your plate at the beach. The next morning, I found myself wandering the docks, watching the cargo cranes swing heavy containers with mechanical precision. The salty air mixed with diesel fumes and the sound of seagulls squawking overhead made the scene oddly cinematic. I half expected to see a trench coat and fedora-wearing detective lurking in the shadows. As I scanned the shipping manifests taped to a nearby notice board, stuff that anyone could see, I noticed something peculiar. A shipment from a company called Edison Global Logistics, scheduled to arrive from Rotterdam. Nothing strange there, except the container's description was vague. Industrial machinery parts. No further details. I decided to do some digging. Back at my flat, armed with a strong cup of tea and a laptop that was definitely due for an upgrade, I started Googling Edison Global. Turns out they're a huge logistics firm with contracts all over Europe. But what caught my eye was their board of directors. The names sounded familiar, like executives I'd come across in the history of big corporations tied to murky deals. One name stood out: Charles Whitman. No, not the infamous sniper, but a businessman with a reputation for aggressive expansion and zero tolerance for pesky regulation. The same Whitman family had roots stretching back to British industrialists who, during the 1930s, had dealings with IG Farben and other German companies. Talk about a family tree with some seriously twisted branches. But here's where it got even weirder. I found a leaked memo from last year, buried deep in an obscure financial forum, suggesting Edison Global was involved in transporting sensitive materials linked to synthetic fuel production. Ironically, the very technology that kept Hitler's war machine running. I chuckled bitterly. Synthetic fuel, in 2024. Was history repeating itself, or was I just losing my mind? Determined to find out, I reached out to an old contact, Lisa Harper, a journalist known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense attitude. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was her. Lisa agreed to meet me at a cafe in Canterbury. When she arrived, her sharp green eyes scanned me like a hawk. She was dressed in a tailored navy blazer over a silk blouse, the kind of outfit that said, "I mean business, but I might still steal your heart." Her red hair was pulled back in a loose bun, strands escaping to frame her face with effortless charm. "All right, spill it," she said, sliding a steaming cappuccino across the table. "What's got you poking around shipping docks and shady logistics firms?" I gave her the rundown. The banks, the corporations, the endless trail of profit tied to some of history's darkest moments. Then I told her about Edison Global and the suspicious shipment. She frowned. "Sounds like you're onto something, but be careful. People who play with this kind of fire tend to get burned." I nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. The past was bleeding into the present, and I was right in the middle of it. As we talked, a man at the next table kept glancing our way. He was in his late 40s, wearing a dark overcoat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. When I caught him staring, he quickly looked away, but the message was clear. I wasn't as invisible as I thought. I whispered to Lisa, "We might have company." She smirked. "Good. Makes things interesting." Little did I know that industrial machinery container wasn't just parts. It was the key to a mystery far bigger than I'd ever imagined, and someone was willing to kill to keep it secret. The moment we left the cafe, the chill in the October air prickled my skin as if the city itself was whispering warnings. Lisa and I decided to split up. Classic spy move, right? I was supposed to tail the mysterious man in the overcoat while she dug through Edison Global's corporate filings. Spoiler, neither of us looked nearly as cool as James Bond, but hey, we made do. I stuck to the shadows as best as I could, trailing the man through Canterbury's winding streets, lined with ancient stone buildings. He moved with purpose, but not too fast, like someone who knew they were being watched but wanted to make it obvious enough to intimidate. He stopped outside a nondescript warehouse near the docks, glanced over his shoulder, then slipped inside. I waited a minute, then edged closer. The warehouse smelled of oil and metal, the faint hum of machinery leaking through the cracked door. Peeking inside, I saw crates stamped with strange symbols. Some looked like chemical formulas. Others were marked with a faded eagle insignia that gave me chills. Not the kind of decor you expect in a sleepy English port town. Just then, the door creaked open behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, to find a tall woman with sharp cheekbones and piercing blue eyes standing there. She was dressed in a sleek black leather jacket, tight dark jeans, and boots that looked like they meant business. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a ponytail, but a few rebellious strands framed her face, giving her a fierce, untamed look. She smiled, just a hint, like a cat toying with its prey. "You're far from home, aren't you?" she said, voice low and smooth with a hint of a London accent. I tried to play it cool. "Just sightseeing." She laughed softly. "Right. Look, you're digging into something dangerous. Edison Global isn't your average logistics firm. They're the modern heirs to those old war profiteers you're so interested in." I blinked. Heirs? Exactly. The same families, the same money, the same game. They've just gotten better at hiding it, she said, stepping closer, the scent of jasmine and leather mixing in the air. "And if you want to stay alive, you'll stop poking around." I swallowed hard but didn't back down. "Why should I trust you?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Because I'm the only one who wants these bastards stopped as much as you do. Name's Emily Clark. And if you're smart, you'll let me help before you end up on the wrong side of history." Before I could respond, the warehouse door slammed open, and two men in dark suits stormed out, barking orders on radios. Emily grabbed my arm, pulling me into the shadows just as spotlights swept the area. "Time to run," she hissed. We darted through narrow alleys, my lungs burning as adrenaline pushed me forward. I stole a glance at Emily. Her face was set, determined, but there was a glint of something else. Maybe fear, maybe hope, maybe both. As we rounded a corner, I tripped over a loose cobblestone, sprawling into the dirt. Emily caught me by the collar, and for a second, our faces were inches apart. I could feel the heat from her breath, the steady thump of her heartbeat. "Not bad for a tourist," she teased, helping me up. We didn't stop until the sounds of pursuit faded behind us. Back at my flat, Emily spilled what she knew. Edison Global was moving parts to restart a synthetic fuel plant. Not just any plant, but one built on the ashes of the old IG Farben facilities in Germany. The synthetic fuel tech wasn't just history, it was alive and being weaponized again. "And the shipment at Dover?" I asked. "Contains the key components, catalysts, machinery, maybe even chemical samples. If this plant goes online, it could shift global power. Imagine a country with fuel independence in a world scrambling for resources." I shook my head. "So, history's repeating itself, and no one's learned a damn thing." Emily's eyes darkened. "That's just the start. There are players in the shadows who want this kept secret. People who'd kill to protect their profits." As she spoke, my phone buzzed with a new message. A photo of a blacked-out shipping container, stamped with the same strange eagle insignia I'd seen in the warehouse. The caption read, "They know you're coming." And just like that, the game had changed. The night settled over Canterbury like a velvet curtain, but sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Emily's warning echoed in my mind as I stared at the photo on my phone, the blacked-out container marked with that ominous eagle insignia. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing with fire. They were building a bonfire, and I was standing too close. Emily paced my cramped flat, her leather boots clicking sharply against the wooden floor. She was still dressed for battle. Black jacket zipped halfway, sleeves rolled up to reveal a silver bracelet that caught the light whenever she moved. There was an edge to her, a mix of steel and vulnerability that made me wonder what had brought her into this mess. "We need access to Edison Global's shipping records," she said, voice low and urgent. "If we can track the container's route, maybe we can intercept it before it reaches Dover." I rubbed my eyes, thinking, easier said than done. Edison's got more firewalls than the Bank of England. Emily smirked. "That's why I brought a friend." Before I could ask who, my phone buzzed again. Another message popped up, a short video this time. Grainy footage from inside a dimly lit factory. Huge vats bubbling with strange chemicals, men in hazmat suits moving like ghosts. Then the camera zoomed in on a large machine, humming ominously, a plaque reading, "Synthetic Fuel Reactor Mekir 4. A chilling voiceover whispered, "History never forgets, neither do the prophets." I swallowed hard. "That's unsettling." Emily leaned in, her eyes sharp. "Welcome to the new arms race. Synthetic fuel means energy independence. It means power. And it means the old players are back, with new tricks." Just then, my door rattled violently. Someone was trying to break in. I grabbed the nearest heavy book, an old copy of 1984, and motioned for Emily to hide. She slipped into the bedroom like a shadow as the door splintered under a heavy kick. Two men in dark suits stormed inside, faces masked with scarves, eyes cold and unyielding. One held a gun. The other scanned the room. "Where is it?" the taller one barked. "The data. The phone." I swallowed my fear and tried to sound braver than I felt. "I don't know what you're talking about," the gunman sneered. "Don't play dumb. We know you've been poking around Edison Global. Hand over your phone." Before I could react, Emily burst out of the bedroom like a whirlwind, tackling the gunman to the floor. She fought with a ferocity I hadn't seen before, fists flying, boots stomping, a quick elbow to the side of his head that sent him reeling. The second man lunged at me, but I ducked and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. "Get out," Emily hissed, catching her breath, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek. I nodded, heart pounding. "You saved my life." She wiped the blood away, eyes blazing. "I'll do it again. But this isn't just about us anymore. It's bigger, much bigger. We knew we couldn't stay. The men would be back, and next time, they wouldn't be so careless." Emily pulled out a battered leather satchel and handed me a small flash drive. "This has everything we've found so far. Contacts, shipping routes, company secrets. It's a start." I pocketed it, feeling the weight, not just of the drive, but of the truth we now carried. As we slipped out into the night, the city's quiet streets felt less safe, shadows lengthening with every step. "Where to now?" I asked. Emily glanced at the horizon, eyes reflecting the distant glow of Dover's port. "We follow the trail. Because if they get that shipment, it won't just be history repeating. It'll be history rewritten." And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The early morning fog clung to the streets of Dover like a shroud as Emily and I approached the port. The sea air was sharp and salty, carrying the distant hum of cargo ships and the clang of metal crates being loaded and unloaded. The docks were alive with activity, workers hustling between containers, unaware, or maybe deliberately oblivious, to the storm brewing beneath their feet. Emily pulled her jacket tighter around her slender frame, the soft leather creaking as she moved. Her dark jeans hugged her legs perfectly, and those boots, worn but sturdy, took each step with quiet confidence. Despite the tension, there was a subtle grace in the way she navigated the chaos. I tried not to get distracted, but it was impossible not to notice the way her auburn hair caught the pale morning light, a fiery contrast to the gray industrial backdrop. We had no official credentials, just determination and the flash drive stuffed in my pocket. Our plan was simple. Find the container, get inside, and uncover whatever secrets Edison Global was trying to bury. The container yard was a maze of towering steel boxes, each one a world of secrets. We slipped past security checkpoints, blending in with workers and drivers, our hearts pounding louder than the distant foghorns. Emily's eyes scanned every face, every movement, calculating risks like a seasoned pro. Then we saw it, the blacked-out container, the same one from the photo, marked with that chilling eagle insignia. It sat at the far end of the yard, guarded by two burly men in dark uniforms, their faces unreadable beneath mirrored sunglasses. Emily whispered, "We'll need a distraction." I swallowed and nodded. "Leave it to me." I spotted a forklift parked nearby, keys hanging from the ignition like an invitation. Grabbing a nearby metal pipe for effect, I crept over and pretended to trip, sending the pipe clattering loudly against the pavement. The guards turned sharply, muttering curses. "Oi, what's that noise?" one barked. Using the moment, Emily slipped past, moving toward the container's rear hatch. I followed, heart hammering, as she produced a small lock-picking set from her jacket pocket. The seconds stretched into eternity until a satisfying click echoed. The door swung open, revealing crates stamped with chemical hazard symbols and crates labeled synthetic fuel components. Inside, we found blueprints, chemical samples sealed in glass vials, and a stack of documents detailing plans to reactivate the old IG Farben plant, not just to produce fuel, but to supply new military contracts. Emily's eyes darkened. This isn't just corporate greed. It's a full-scale operation to rebuild a war machine disguised as an energy project. Suddenly, footsteps thundered behind us. The guards had caught on. "Run!" Emily hissed, grabbing a stack of papers and shoving them into her bag. We sprinted through the container yard, dodging forklifts and startled workers, the guards in hot pursuit. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but adrenaline pushed me forward. We burst out onto the quay, the cold sea breeze hitting our faces as we scrambled onto a waiting fishing boat, the engine roaring to life beneath us. As we sped away from the docks, Emily pulled out the stolen documents, flipping through pages filled with names, bankers, politicians, corporate executives, all tangled in the web. I looked over her shoulder, the weight of the conspiracy settling like a stone in my stomach. "Why would anyone risk this?" I asked. Emily's gaze met mine, fierce and unyielding. "Because power and profit don't care how many lives get crushed beneath them, and because the ghosts of the past never really die. They just wait for the right moment to rise again." As the boat sliced through the gray waves, I knew one thing for certain. We just stirred a hornet's nest, and the sting was only beginning. The fishing boat rocked gently against the choppy sea as Emily and I caught our breath, the salty spray misting our faces. The coast of Dover faded behind us, swallowed by the thick morning fog. For a moment, the world felt suspended, like we were trapped between what had been and what was about to come. Emily leaned back, her leather jacket creaking softly, eyes fixed on the stormy horizon. She pulled a slender silver chain from beneath her blouse, twisting it nervously between her fingers. That little detail caught me off guard, something fragile beneath all that fierce determination. I broke the silence. "So, what now? We have the documents, but they're just paper. How do we stop this madness?" She looked at me, a slow smile curling at the corner of her lips. "We expose it. Make the world see who's really behind this. But first, we need allies. People who can help us get the truth out without getting silenced." I nodded, though the weight of it pressed down on me. "Like who?" She hesitated, then said, "There's someone in London, an investigative reporter named James Porter. He's been chasing stories about corporate corruption for years, but he's smart enough to stay under the radar. If anyone can handle this, it's him." "Sounds promising," I said, trying to sound hopeful, though the last thing I wanted was to drag more people into this dangerous game. Emily's eyes flickered with a hint of amusement. "Don't worry. James can handle himself, and I've got a feeling you'll want to meet him." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat or a promise?" She laughed, a low, sultry sound that momentarily broke the tension. "Maybe a bit of both." Back on dry land, the city felt colder, grayer, as if the fog hadn't just lifted from the sea, but settled over everything. We made our way to a small cafe tucked away on a side street in Soho, a place Emily said James frequented. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet conversations and the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods. At a corner table sat a man in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a 5 o'clock shadow that gave him a rugged charm. His sharp blue eyes were hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses as he typed furiously on a battered laptop. Emily nudged me. "That's him." I approached cautiously, heart hammering. "James Porter?" He looked up, eyes narrowing as if assessing whether I was friend or foe. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing grin. "Depends. Who's asking?" I introduced myself and Emily, then explained as much as we dared about the conspiracy, the synthetic fuel plant, Edison Global, the blacked-out container, and the shadowy figures who would kill to keep it quiet. James listened, never interrupting, fingers steepled beneath his chin. When we finished, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This goes deeper than I thought. The old war profiteers aren't just history. They're alive and kicking, dressed in suits instead of uniforms." I couldn't help but joke. "Great. So the villains just got a corporate makeover." He chuckled. "Exactly. And they're better at hiding the stains." James pulled out a worn notebook, flipping to a page filled with scrawled names and dates. "I've been following some of these threads for years. Whispers about secret shipments, offshore accounts, backdoor deals. You're not the first to stumble onto this." Emily's gaze hardened. "Then why hasn't anyone stopped it?" "Because the system protects itself," James said grimly. "The media's controlled, politicians are compromised, and the public is distracted. But that can change, if we play our cards right." He looked at me, eyes sharp. "Think you're ready to go deeper? Because once you step through that door, there's no turning back." I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling in. "I don't have much choice, do I?" James smiled, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Welcome to the real war." Outside, the city hurried on, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath its polished surface. And as the three of us sat huddled over plans and secrets, I realized this was only the beginning of a battle that would test everything I thought I knew about history, power, and betrayal. London at night was a different beast. Neon signs flickering in puddles, distant sirens wailing, and the ever-present hum of a city that never quite slept. James led us through narrow alleys toward a nondescript building tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a greasy spoon cafe. The kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without giving a second thought. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and old paper. Walls lined with filing cabinets groaned under the weight of secrets. James's makeshift newsroom buzzed with quiet energy, half a dozen journalists huddled over computers, phones ringing, fingers flying over keyboards. It was a far cry from the glossy offices of the big media corporations, but here, truth was the currency, and everyone paid up. Emily settled into a worn leather chair, pulling her jacket tighter around her slender frame. The low-cut blouse she'd chosen for the day hinted at a confidence that went beyond the professional, a subtle, almost dangerous allure that seemed to command the room without a word. I couldn't help but steal a glance, reminded that even in the darkest shadows, light and temptation persisted. James wasted no time. "We've been digging into Edison Global for months, but this synthetic fuel operation is new intel. If we can link it to the old IG Farben network, it'll blow the lid off centuries of corruption." He handed me a folder thick with documents, contracts, emails, shipping manifests, all pointing to a sprawling conspiracy spanning continents and decades. I flipped through the pages, each word sinking in like a punch to the gut. This is massive, Emily nodded, and dangerous. These people don't just want to protect profits, they want to control the future. Suddenly, the newsroom door creaked open. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped inside, his sharp features framed by slicked-back hair. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room before landing on us. "James," he said smoothly, voice dripping with authority. "I hear you're stirring up trouble again." James's jaw tightened. "Marcus Langley. To what do we owe the displeasure?" Langley smiled thinly. "Just checking in. Edison Global takes a keen interest in its reputation. I'm sure you understand." Emily's eyes flashed. "We're not afraid of a few suits." Langley's gaze lingered on her, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Brave words, but bravery has its price. Before tension could boil over, James interrupted. "If you're here to threaten us, you're wasting your time." Langley's smile faded. "Think carefully. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed." He turned on his heel and strode away, leaving a chill in his wake. As the door clicked shut, Emily exhaled sharply. "That was a warning." James looked at me, eyes hard. "You're in deeper than you think, and now they know we're onto them." I swallowed hard, the weight of the unfolding storm pressing down. The rabbit hole was deeper, darker, and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. But backing down wasn't an option. Not now. As the city lights flickered outside, I realized one thing. The battle wasn't just for the truth anymore. It was for survival. And in this game, trust was the rarest and most dangerous commodity of all. The next morning, the sun struggled to pierce through London's perpetual grey haze as Emily, James, and I gathered around a battered wooden table strewn with maps, documents, and a laptop glowing softly in the dim light. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old paper, the scent of desperate investigation. Emily traced a finger along a faded map of Europe. Her nails painted a deep crimson that caught the light just enough to hint at danger. Her blouse, slightly unbuttoned at the collar, revealed a slender neck adorned with a delicate silver chain, the same one she'd nervously twisted on the fishing boat. There was a tension in her posture, a dance of vulnerability and steel that made her all the more magnetic. "We need to follow the money," Emily said, voice steady despite the storm brewing beneath. "Edison Global's shipping routes are just the surface. The real power lies in who's funding this synthetic fuel plant." James tapped furiously on the laptop, pulling up a tangled web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and shadowy investors. "Look here," he said, pointing to a cluster of linked names, bankers, executives, even politicians, spread across the UK, the US, and the Middle East. I squinted at the screen. These aren't just random players. This is a network built on decades of secrecy and silence. Emily nodded. "And it's not just about fuel. It's about control. Energy independence means leverage, and leverage means influence in global politics." Suddenly, the door burst open. A courier, breathless, handed James an envelope stamped with a crimson seal. No markings, no return address. James frowned, breaking the seal carefully. Inside was a single photograph, an aerial shot of an old industrial complex, its roof partially collapsed. A handwritten note on the back read, "I.G. Farben's ghost still haunts. Beware the shadows in Frankfurt." Emily's eyes narrowed. "They know we're close." A chill ran down my spine. The past was alive, and it was watching. James looked up. "If the plant's in Frankfurt, we need to get there before they do. But this won't be easy. We're dealing with powerful forces who won't hesitate to strike." Emily's gaze met mine, fierce and unyielding. We didn't come this far to back down. I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling deep. Then let's go find the truth, before it's buried forever. As we packed our gear, a storm raged outside, both in the skies above and the shadows closing in around us. The hunt for answers was turning into a race against time, and the line between friend and foe blurred like the fog creeping through the London streets. And somewhere, in the heart of Europe, the ghost of a dark empire waited, ready to rise again. The flight to Frankfurt was a blur of restless thoughts and stolen glances between Emily and me. She wore a sleek, charcoal trench coat over a fitted black dress, the kind that suggested she could walk into any room and command attention, and maybe a few hearts, too. Her heels clicked with purpose through the airport terminal, echoing like a countdown to something inevitable. Once we landed, the city felt both familiar and foreign. Frankfurt's skyline, a jagged silhouette of glass towers and ancient spires, stood in stark contrast to the industrial wasteland we were tracking down. We rented a battered old car and drove through winding roads lined with skeletal trees, the autumn leaves swirling in the chill wind. The factory loomed ahead, a hulking relic, half swallowed by rust and rot. Broken windows stared like blind eyes, and twisted metal girders jutted from crumbling walls. But inside, the faint hum of machinery suggested life where there should have been death. Emily pulled a flashlight from her bag, the beam cutting through the thick darkness as we slipped inside. The air was heavy with chemical tang and dust, every footstep echoing ominously. Suddenly, a faint whisper, a voice carried on the stale air. We froze. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a man in a worn lab coat, his face lined with exhaustion and guilt. He looked at us with haunted eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "They'll kill you for what you're digging up." Emily stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. "We're not here to hurt you. We want to stop this." The man hesitated, then handed over a battered notebook filled with chemical formulas and detailed notes. This plant was reborn from the ashes of IG Farben. They're not just making fuel, they're weaponizing it. He looked me in the eye. They have plans that could change the course of history. As he spoke, the distant sound of engines roared outside. We exchanged a glance. Someone else had found us. We raced to the exit, heartbeats hammering in sync with our footsteps. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt, men in suits pouring out, faces set like stone. Emily pulled me behind a rusted shipping container as bullets tore through the night air. "We have to move, now," she hissed. Adrenaline surged as we sprinted toward the shadows of the city, the deadly game tightening around us. I realized then that this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a fight for survival. And as sirens wailed in the distance, one chilling thought settled in. The past wasn't done with us yet. We darted through Frankfurt's labyrinthine alleys, the echo of gunfire fading but the danger far from over. Emily's hand gripped mine tightly, not just for support, but as a silent promise that we'd face whatever came next, together. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, held a spark that refused to be extinguished, even in the darkest moments. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, misting in the cold night air, as we reached a narrow bridge overlooking the main river. The city lights shimmered on the water's surface, deceptively calm beneath the chaos. For a fleeting second, the weight of everything pressed down, the secrets uncovered, the lives at stake, the legacy of a darkness that refused to die. Emily pulled me close. "This isn't over," she whispered. "They've only just begun." I nodded, the flash drive burning in my pocket, a beacon of truth and danger intertwined. "Then we make sure the world knows, no matter the cost." Suddenly my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Back off, or history will repeat itself, with you as the next casualty." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The same shadows that fueled empires of greed and death were watching, waiting, ready to strike again. But now, armed with the truth and allies who refused to be silenced, we had a choice: surrender to the darkness or fight to expose it. As the river carried the city's secrets beneath the moonlight, I realized this was only the beginning of a war waged in shadows, one that would test every ounce of courage, trust, and hope. And somewhere, deep in the night, a new player was making their move. The game had changed, and so had the stakes.